Firstly, massive thanks to be able to come and share 15 minutes with you, and to Lizzie and the team for facilitating the event. I guess I stand here as someone, my job description is to really try and work out where learning is going in organisations. And this is one of the most exciting times, but one of the most challenging times we have ever faced. And as someone who's been in learning for 30 years, you might look at me and say, you can't possibly have been 30 years when you look so beautifully young. I have. And I think the transformation and what's interesting, some of the things you've mentioned in the research absolutely tie in with a broader look at what's going on in learning. None of us exist in a sector which is immune from change, and things happening elsewhere are important for us. So I've got now 14 minutes to share with you some new directions for learning. Just to say, CIPD, most of our stuff is free for you. Just to say, if you Google CIPD Epicenter, all of our free research, reports, stuff is there for you. So as a professional institute, we're here to support you to be great at what you do. And interesting for us, in the last 3 years, we've doubled our L&D membership size to around 33,000 members. So we all recognise that support is really important. So 3 things I'm going to look at. Meeting the needs of modern learners, around 4 minutes on that. Thinking about integrating learning into the organisational ecosystem, what that actually means. And interesting hearing some of the table conversations now. This is a challenge for us in terms of how organisations are working. And lastly, I just want to focus a little bit on the L&D team and what this means for our own development. This is a crucial time when we need to be developed because of the significant things that are happening around us. So first of all, I just want to start by thinking about the needs of modern learners, of which you and I are one. On my commute into London today, I was watching 2 people undertaking development activities on the train. So the modern learner now is quite sophisticated. And I want to just highlight some of the things that your learners will be expecting probably of the learning delivery in the workplace. This is what people's expectation now is from the evidence base. So the first thing is, learners are incredibly discerning now. We operate in a market where most of us are customers and are served by really good providers. So we now operate, and 2 people already said they're using YouTube for solving problems. We were talking about exactly the same thing. So the experience is now that our internal learning systems are competing in a world where there is much great stuff going on. And we see, obviously this is an Apple store, we see now generally the invitation for involvement is quite significant in our lives. And therefore we need to understand, as learning professionals, the bar has been raised in terms of what the expectation is. The days of delivering crummy e-learning with an 8 out of 10 test for compliance are gone. Those days just cannot exist anymore. We need to realise that our learners are far more sophisticated on this. And don't grasp me up, but my GDPR training, we sat there and Googled some of the answers on the test, because that's what you do. I don't need to remember these things. I need to know how to access the learning. Your learners will be sophisticated, discerning learners. And we're seeing a real move towards self-directed learning. It doesn't mean that you don't have to have core programs, because clearly in policing there are crucial elements that police officers must have. But what we're seeing in organisations that are truly learning organisations are recognising that generic programs need to be supplemented by some form of self-direction. And I've put some pictures of coffee types on there. You only need to go down and see what coffees you can order now. So we have learners who will expect a diverse opportunity to learn. And if you want to look this one up, Deci and Ryan, self-determination theory, talks all about the motivation that learners gain when they have some choice about their learning. One way to kill learning is to mandate it and force people to do it in a certain way. We cannot make people learn. People learn when they want to. So that's about empowering learners. Now, clearly we will have courses, and courses still exist, but we're seeing models now, people like Nick Shackleton-Jones, who are pioneering this, to say the movement now is more to resources than courses. We're looking at how do we create a wealth of learning assets which can be drawn down alongside our courses. So it's about tooling up learners to be able to access what they need where they need. And this also is vitally about connecting learners. So for me today, it's a pleasure to come to events like this, because these connection events are vital. We need to be around peers who challenge our thinking, support our thinking. And part of our role now as learning professionals is to establish effective communities of practice in our organisations, be they face-to-face or digital. Most organisations aspire to have socialised learning, but it falls pretty flat. That's the general thing we see. In a big bank just over there in the city, recently looking at their socialised learning platform, and the learning manager literally went, "I cannot believe it. We've spent all this money on a system and the only people using it are the vegan cookery group." So we said to them, perhaps you need to go and talk to the vegan cookery group as to why they find this socialised environment useful to them. So socialised learning is a challenge, but we need to recognise that communities of practice have come of age mainly because of the power of these smart devices which we have in our hands. And we're looking about lifelong learning. People are coming into policing now as a graduate profession. This possibly is a lifelong commitment for some people. But we need to recognise for many people now, we are supporting wider learning in their lives. So the things that we deliver in terms of police learning has a wider impact. And great learning organisations recognise that this is about a wider skill set as well. And if we truly want to attract people into our professions, it is about offering a career path and those kind of opportunities. So again, lifelong learning is absolutely crucial. Which brings us on to modern, sophisticated learners. Now, we need to think how we integrate learning into the learning ecosystem, and it is a learning ecosystem. For too long, L&D departments have existed in isolation within organisations, divorced from senior managers, as we'll see in a moment, senior managers who often request out-of-date methodologies. I can probably say these things because I'm at CIPD. You may want to smile or nod if you agree. But senior leaders, as we'll see in a moment, have a real challenge. They are not the learning professionals. I do not go to my GP and tell him to prescribe me antibiotics when I have a sore throat. He is the professional who can diagnose and advise. And we sitting here are the learning professionals who know how best to deliver learning within our organisations. So it's just some tips around this. Often we separate learning from the true context in which learning needs to take place. There is nothing wrong with folks going on courses, and when working, I recognise some faces in the room, working with some of the police forces, you are doing fantastic things, but we need to recognise that sending people to sit in classrooms is not necessarily an effective way of delivering organisational learning. It just doesn't work that way. We're seeing trends now. Josh Bursin using phrases like learning in the flow of work. Harold Jarkey, learning is work and work is learning. The skill of the modern learning professional is not only to provide great courses, but to understand how do we provide performance support in the moment. And for police officers to have mobile devices means it opens up many opportunities for learning to be reinforced in communities of practice to allow learning to happen in the genuine context. And this means reshaping leadership perceptions of learning. Senior leaders have a very tough job. I wouldn't necessarily want to be a senior leader, but the reality is that often the mindset around learning is quite outdated. Senior leaders went on formal courses, went on master's programs, often in business schools or whatever. And what we're seeing now is that the concept of learning, we need to help senior leaders to understand what effective learning looks like. It's a reshaping process. And that's why we need to take a more consultative role, not arrogantly to stand with senior leaders and say this is how you must do it, but help leaders to understand the evidence base about how modern effective learning works, which is about redesigning our thinking. It is about accessible, agile, as well as formal. This little device, for me, is probably the game changer. This is the game changer which we have now. This is not necessarily about virtual reality, whatever. We have an accessible device right now which we can access for learning. So we need to think about accessibility and how we help police officers to access learning exactly when they need it. And also this is about organisational issues and data. We're seeing in most modern learning organisations now data is a crucial part of what we do. It's no good now just guessing. Intuition just doesn't cut it anymore. We have data within our organisations which allow us to target learning rather than sheep dipping everybody through everything. So intelligence and data is really important, and the modern learning professional has to have a data head as well as a design head. And it's about tracking value, not volume. First thing I did when I joined CIPD was killed off the annual survey at CIPD, the sacrosanct annual survey, because it reported the average number of training days per employee, which is an absolutely useless figure. It means nothing. The average training spend per member means absolutely nothing. You cannot average learning in the organisation. We need to understand that People need learning at certain points of their career, so it isn't a linear process. We need to understand that just because people have been on courses doesn't necessarily mean that they're effective. I had someone in one of my organisations who went on intermediate Excel 5 times because he enjoyed having lunch and time out. So let's start recognising it is about measuring value, not volume. And to that extent, we don't want to overload our operational managers, but our operational managers are a key part of our learning team. It's not about saying to managers it's more to do. The effective measurement of learning is with operational staff. They're the ones who can see it, not the learning professionals. So just to kind of close, what does this mean for us as learning development professionals? This is a different, changing environment, incredibly exciting times for us, but there are some things we need to look at. I noticed you had, thank you for putting it on one of your slides. We wrote this report, Professionalising Learning Development. I was one of the co-authors. It's free for you on the CIPD website. There might not be a free lunch, but there is a free research report for you. And what we did is we called out in this report key areas of development for modern learning professionals. And I've listed 3 of these just quickly under knowledge, behaviours and L&D specialism. So this is an evidence-based, it's an Andy's best guess. This is from about 600 global learning leaders who diagnosed the needs of their teams. What was really interesting is, in terms of practitioners, 48% said they were very concerned about their own learning. Divide the room in half. Half of us probably, at least, are thinking we are struggling in the midst of this. So we need to recognise we need to invest in ourselves. So 3 areas of knowledge we need to pick up on. One is business acumen, really understanding where the company, the organisation is going. Analytics and understanding how value creation is measured and how effectiveness is measured. And the whole thing of creating learning cultures. 3 areas of core knowledge which we need to operate on. On core behaviours, situational decision making. More than a quarter said they struggle with understanding how to adapt learning for given scenarios. Professional courage to challenge learners and leaders, and also passion for learning. How do we build a workforce that just loves learning? And last on L&D specialism, the 3 key areas for learning is understanding how we measure learning impact. We are still doing this very sporadically. So understanding there are ways of measuring learning impact beyond Kirkpatrick. Bless Kirkpatrick, go and have a look at Brinkerhoff if you haven't had a look. There are other ways of measuring effective learning beyond chasing Kirkpatrick ROI, which is frankly depressing sometimes. Okay. Social collaboration is another one. We need to understand how to build great learning communities, and there's a whole raft we could talk about there. If you want me to talk about how to run successful communities, I will come another time. And adult learning theories as well. It's now moved on. We're not talking about learning styles. Honey and Mumford, it's been debunked. It's too simple. We need to think about new ways of understanding how adults learn. So a whole new approach to adult learning theory is really important for us. So this is not an evolution. This is a revolution in organisational learning. And in a short lightning talk, I just encourage you, if you're feeling uncomfortable, join the gang. But this is the most exciting time in learning. And we together have the chance to transform our organisations. Modern learners, ecosystems, and brilliant professional L&D teams. That's what's going to cut the modern learning organisation. Thank you.